Good day to you. Is there a bigger country that's more mysterious than Russia? I mean, we hardly know anything about Russia in the United States, even though we have Russian immigrants living right here in the Pocono Mountains. I mean, some of you may know about Russia. You may have traveled to Russia. I haven't been to Russia. My wife has been to Russia only in a flyover going to a European country. They stayed in Russia for a few hours. We know very little about Russia. But what we do know about Russia and the Russian entertainment media, because it is tough to find out information about Russia for reasons that we will talk about in class today. It's one of the reasons we don't know about Russia that much. But what we do know is that the Russian entertainment history, when it comes to media, parallels the history of Russia itself. I mean, Russia is a downsized country, and it's still the largest country in the world. It used to be the Soviet Union, right, which consisted of a lot of different countries like Uzbekistan. And now it's just down to Russia, which still has something like 11 time zones in it. It's amazing, right? In the U.S., we have 4. It's a monstrous country, so you would think, oh yeah, it's got to have a really monstrous media system, a really well-developed media system, right? No, not right. Nevertheless, despite Russia's individuality, we also start to study material in this chapter that we're taking on today, which, by the way, is chapter 10, right? It's not the next chapter, chapter 8. It's chapter 10 now. We're jumping up. One of the things that you'll learn about in this chapter, and we'll see in future chapters, is that some of the trends that are happening in Russia are also happening in other countries. I'll try and point those out today. So basically in the 1990s, Russia was downsized. The Soviet Union broke apart. It moved away from a communist country to whatever it was going to become, which people are still trying to figure out. Just let my son's friend's motorcycle leave here. It can be quite loud. Looks like he's keeping it quiet today, I think. Anyway, so back to Russia and the history of Russia. In the 1990s, it was a brand new country after the Soviet Union era, and it was falling on hard times. It was having a hard time reorganizing itself. It had an economic crash in its country. And basically, the media industry crashed along with that economic crash as Russia was reformed out of the former Soviet Union. So you have the loss of funding to film, for example. The communist government used to put a lot of money into film. They lost that funding, so the film industry basically collapsed. And movie theaters collapsed along with those films as people lost their disposable income as the economy contracted. At the same time, you have piracy that became really big in Russia. So people just started importing stuff for free that they were not paying for on Russian media channels, television, film, pay-per-view, and all that. They get it for free in Russia. And some of the piracy was actually done by the legitimate companies themselves. They would pirate stuff and then bring it back in and sell it at a reduced rate. So that introduces the idea that there's corruption in the Russian media system. Just to give you an idea how far that system collapsed in terms of the film industry, they went from prior to the 1990s doing 470 films a year, which is not that much compared to Hollywood, around 10,000, but 470 films, that collapsed down to 20 to 50 films a year. Whoa. Sorry, not 10,000 films for Hollywood, 1,000 films for Hollywood. Anyway, the Russian situation is 470 films down to 20 to 50 per year. Wow. In the late 1990s, things started to change for the media industry. Of all things, the company that led the way was MTV. MTV coming from the United States into Russia in 1998, and it really started to influence Russian music. And Russia was a big consumer of music, so it also, in turn, then helped to fuel some of the popular tastes that Russians have that are more American. Like, I'm not wearing a shirt today that's typically American, but like t-shirts and sweatshirts and baseball caps. That came along with MTV. It started to show Russia the way. It started to influence Russian media content in general. And it also started to influence TV content across the board because previously Russian TV content was very reserved, and MTV was not reserved. You may consider today to be not much, but at the time when it came in, I Want My MTV and all the videos that were Home Sweet Home and all the sexuality in the videos that was available with the big hair bands in the 80s, that's what was going into Russia. That was influencing Russia. Russian TV content also expanded. So part of what started to happen in the late 1990s was Russia, not yet capable of producing its own content in a robust way, went out and started purchasing soap operas from around the world. purchasing soap operas, many of which came from Mexico. We talked about Mexico in terms of it having a big export business for its telenovelas. Russia was a big consumer and still is of Mexican telenovelas. But Russia, at the same time, they would do what other countries do that are not considered to be first world countries. That's a really terrible way to talk about countries. Actually, let's mention now why it is a terrible way. First world, second world, third world, that's from the Soviet Union era. Don't use those terms, please. First world used to be those countries that aligned with the United States. The U.S., for example, was friendly with Canada. Canada was a first world country. Second world was Russia and all those countries that aligned. So like Poland was friendly to Russia, second world country. Third world countries were all those countries that were so small and vulnerable they could not align with one country, because if they did and the other country won, they would be crushed. So they were third world countries, no power. We don't refer to those countries. That's a very demeaning and condescending way to talk about countries. We refer to them today as developing countries. At any rate, Russia, as a developing country, will often borrow ideas from the West and then refashion those ideas. So one of its longest running and most popular game shows is called Field of Miracles, which is a format that is essentially stolen from the Wheel of Fortune with a couple changes in there. By the 2000s, the Russian economy had started to improve. People started to have disposable income. You know what that is, right? Extra money to spend that you don't have to spend on bills. And TV shows started to make more profits because they had more expansive programming thanks to MTV. And TV took those profits and put it into film and stimulated the film industry. And then the films were then shown on television. So you start to have a sort of complementary relationship going on amongst Russian media. And through this, entertainment starts to emerge as the dominant content in Russian media. And that's true across the world, right? Entertainment media is what most people consider. Not news, not talk shows, not educational media, not documentaries, not high art. For the most part, it's entertainment media. Now, what satisfies as entertainment, you can think about that on your own. One person's opera will be entertaining, but entertainment as a goal to get out of the experience, that's what's going on with media across the world, really, including Russia. Let's look at the present day Russia. We've got 5 companies dominating the television market, just like across the rest of the world, right? We got 4 or 5 big players in most of the countries of the world. We've got Gazprom, Gazprom. That's a company that was formed out of a natural gas company in Russia. Russia has huge natural gas reserves. It's an exporter across the world. That company is owned by the government. It's got 7 channels. It's got film and production studios. It's owned by the government. You hear what I'm saying, right? We don't have channels owned by the government in the United States. I'm not saying our channels are influenced by outside sources like advertisers, but I am saying we don't have that. There was a competing company that used to be very critical of the government, and what happened was the government under Vladimir Putin, who's still the president of Russia for 20 like years now, he approved the merger, or the purchase actually, of the second company, which was called Media Most, and it had a brand called NTV, and Media Most NTV was outspoken. It was bought by Gazprom, and suddenly all that criticism of the government went away. So now I'm introducing another element that's unique about Russian media. You do not criticize the government in Russia. I mean, tiny criticism and not big criticism. Bad things may happen to you, like jail or go disappearing or be poisoned. So the next channel on here, the next dominant player, I should say, is Channel 1. Pervy Canal, that's the Russian channel, Pervy Canal. Canal is the channel and Pervy is 1. And this has more of a global audience than the other channels. It's actually reaching a lot of expats from Russia. People have moved elsewhere. Like, I bet if you go to some of the Russian communities here in the Poconos or up around the Bushkill area, up around there, you find Russian communities. They probably have this channel coming in by satellite, Channel 1. This channel is 38.9% owned by the state of Russia. So this is also owned, not fully, but partially by government. And you can see a pattern here right now. These channels are not going to be critical of government. The next channel, number 3, it's a big long acronym describing a really long Russian word that I'm not going to try and pronounce. It's VGTRK. VGTRK, it's owned outright by the government, several channels. So the first 3 channels, all government influenced and controlled, right? The 4th channel and the 5th channel are commercial channels. They don't have government influence. One is the National Media Group. I shouldn't say they don't have government influence. The Russian government still influences. But the National Media Group, that has taken advantage of a law that limits foreign ownership that came in 2014. Foreign ownership of media in Russia is limited to 20%. Like Disney can't go in there and buy 80% of one of these companies. 20% is it. So this national media group, the Fourth Channel, they ramped up their local Russian content instead of airing foreign content, and they found a niche audience there. And then finally we have CTC Media. CTC is devoted exclusively to entertainment, no news, no documentaries, no high culture, exclusively entertainment, which underscores how important entertainment is in Russia and the rest of the world. Let's talk about the film industry because it's a different situation in the present day. It's not as cohesive as those 5 TV players. It's more fragmented. You do have Russian government entities that are big players in the stimulation of film as an industry in Russia. We don't see that in the U.S. We don't see a Russian Ministry of Culture counterpart in the U.S. Well, that's what you have in Russia, the Russian Ministry of Culture. They're going to be funding films that preserve Russian culture, Russian music, Russian dignity, Russian art. All forms of Russian culture are open to be preserved. Just like in the United States, we have a culture that says on July the 4th, we go out and celebrate our independence by looking at fireworks. That's part of our culture. And we eat common food, burgers and hamburgers, and mixed with neighbors and fly colors that are associated with America. That's culture. So Russia has plenty of culture to preserve it. It's a huge country, 11 time zones. It's got peoples that they're waking up as the others have long been to bed. It's got peoples who look very Asian on one side and people who look very, quote, white European on the other side. Russia's got tremendous diversity just because of its size, and the Russian Ministry of Culture is involved in funding film to preserve some of the cultural traditions. You also have the Federal Film Foundation in Russia, Federal Film Foundation in Russia, another entity, government-related entity set up to stimulate film, showing really the importance and power of film as a medium of expressing culture. I mean, is there anything more powerful than seeing film? I mean, is television as powerful? Is radio as powerful? I mean, open question, depends on in what way you're asking that, but I bet your mind is saying, film's pretty powerful. Then also the Russian government approved funding to refurbish theaters. Remember I talked about theaters closing in the 1990s to make them nice, to bring them up to currency with their sound systems and stadium seating and everything that goes into a movie theater today. 50% minimum of those films that are shown in those theaters have to be Russian films. Again, you have these quotas in place because of the American cultural imperialism, all those examples of media content going all over the world from the United States and just overwhelming other countries in what in terms of what they're able to produce. So they got to set these quotas so that they're just not besieged by content from the US and the UK, by the way. However, having said all this, imports from the US in terms of films still dominate Russia. 82% of films that are big films that are shown in Russia, US films. I mean, could you imagine we had 82% of Russian films as what most of the is dominating the market in the United States? It just wouldn't happen, right? It's a very different situation there in Russia. The government has tried to stimulate the film industry by reducing prices for production, taxes, in other words, by stimulating co-productions. There's that word again we mentioned in a previous chapter. That's referring to sharing the financing with another country. Russia's actually worked very closely with China. It's been most successful with co-productions between Russia and China. You wouldn't think that, right? When you hear about Russia and China in the U.S. news, it's always they're antagonistic to each other. Well, not really true. Ironically, perhaps the most popular Russian TV content that's gone around the world is Masha the Bear. Masha the Bear, very popular, but it's not produced by one of these government channels, so that's got to be kind of a sticking point for the Russian government. Now we're going to wrap up with the digital revolution and how that's affecting Russia. It's affecting Russia very similarly to how it's affecting the rest of the world, just starting with the idea that TV audiences, television audiences, are losing TV companies, TV channels, TV stations are losing their audiences to digital platforms. People are getting their video, their motion picture. I'm trying to get out of this light coming in through my window. They're getting their... Let's do this. Yeah, moves it that way. Let's do this. Okay. So they're losing their audience to digital platforms, to everything from Amazon to YouTube to Instagram. And so TV stations are developing their own digital platforms. And in fact, Channel 1, that gas company channel, it has 280,000 videos that you can access that they posted on their digital platform. The digital revolution has really hurt music in Russia. It's made piracy so easy to do. It's a click of a mouse, and you can copy a whole entire movie. And the policing of piracy and the regulations of piracy are not as strict in Russia, so it's just not monitored as much. And actually, there's a film festival that's been started in Russia to try and stimulate the production of film in the digital arena. It's called the DUB apostrophe DR at sign. I can't even make sense of it when I look at it with my eyes. You can look at it in the chapter. It's an online film festival to try and promote film on digital platforms in Russia. So that's going to wrap up this still mysterious country, in part because we can't get a lot of information out of it. Russia's very protected, and those media channels are mostly government owned or at the very least influenced. Not to say that Russia is any less influenced in its media industries in the U.S., but it's a subject for another time, and that has to do with commercialization, not with government influence. I hope you are thinking about these ideas even after tomorrow, because they're really, really perplexing and they need to be thought about to make your way through them. Have a great day.